I have always been an awkward person. Making friends has never come easily to me. I overthink my words, get nervous in group conversations, and sometimes just prefer to keep to myself rather than risk embarrassing interactions. But in late 2019, as I started my sixth form, I decided to push myself out of my comfort zone. That's when I joined the school's Dungeons and Dragons Club. I had never played before, but I had always been fascinated by the idea of creating a character, rolling dice, and going on epic adventures with a group of like-minded people. It was supposed to be a way for me to meet people who shared my interests, and maybe, just maybe, I'd make a friend. That's where I met May. She was different from the rest of the group, quiet, reserved, yet there was something about her that immediately made me feel safe. She had this way of looking at people, like she really saw them, really listened. And when she invited me to join her own D&D party outside of school, I was ecstatic. I had never had a best friend before, but I thought maybe, just maybe, May would be that person for me. At first, our friendship was everything I had ever wanted. We messaged constantly, shared memes and inside jokes, and talked about everything from our favorite books to our deepest fears. She was kind, supportive, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else ever had. It felt like I had finally found someone who truly got me. But then things started to change. The first time we hung out alone outside of school, I noticed something off. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just little things. Moments of silence that stretched too long, as if she were expecting me to say something specific. The way she would laugh at a joke, but her eyes wouldn't match the laughter, staying cold and watchful. Sometimes she would completely ignore me mid-conversation, her expression going blank as if I had ceased to exist. Then, a few minutes later, she would snap back with an odd, almost rehearsed joke that never quite landed. It felt like she was playing a role, like she was trying to mimic what a normal friendship should look like but didn't quite know how. I brushed it off. People can be awkward, right? I was awkward too. Maybe she just needed time to feel comfortable around me. Then I left school earlier than expected due to personal reasons, and that's when May's behavior escalated. At first, she just seemed sad that I was leaving. She texted me constantly, saying she missed me, that school wasn't the same without me. It was flattering at first. I had never been someone's favorite person before. But then, the messages became more frequent. When can we meet up? Tomorrow? The next day? I told her I had started working full-time and barely had any free time. She didn't take that well. Send me a picture of your calendar. I don't believe you. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. When I sent her a picture, showing my schedule packed with work shifts, she still wasn't satisfied. There's a tower gap on Wednesday. We can meet then. When I told her I needed that time to rest, she sent a long message about how much she loved me, how I was her best friend, and how it hurt that I didn't want to see her. It was only then that I realized something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, her messages became more erratic. She would go from begging me to hang out to sending guilt-tripping texts about how she cried herself to sleep because I was avoiding her. She started calling me at odd hours, and if I didn't answer, she would spam my inbox with messages. I tried to create some distance, but she would not let me. Then, the day she came to my house for the first time, everything changed. She arrived hours later than we had agreed, and by the time she showed up, I was already exhausted. My parents were home, which made me feel safer, but the moment May stepped inside, I could feel a shift in the air. At first, she acted normal until she saw my house. My parents' home was nice. Not a mansion or anything, but big enough to be considered impressive. Most of my friends would make a few passing comments about how lucky I was, maybe joke about moving in. But May wouldn't stop talking about it. Wow, your house is huge. God, you're so lucky. This is ridiculous. I can't believe your parents live like this. Her tone started as admiration, but soon it turned bitter. Do they even need a house this big? Do they really earn this money? Or do they just exploit people? I had never discussed my parents' jobs with her. I didn't even talk about money in general. It made me uncomfortable. But the way she said it, like she was accusing me of something, sent chills down my spine. Then, things got even stranger. She asked if we could cuddle. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face remained serious. Come on, just for a little bit. I declined, saying I wasn't comfortable with that. She didn't take no for an answer. She sat uncomfortably close to me on the couch, touching my arm, leaning against me. Every time I tried to move away, she would scoot closer. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Are you even happy with your boyfriend?" The question was so out of place, so random, that I just stared at her. What? You could do better. I mean, do you even love him? I was done. I told her I was too tired to hang out and that she needed to leave. She didn't argue, but as she walked out, she looked over her shoulder and smiled. If you won't make time for me, I'll just start showing up. I didn't think she meant it. But the next day, she changed her jogging route to pass by my house. Every single day. Then, she found my boyfriend on social media, even though I had never given her his name. She messaged him constantly, telling him she loved him, that he needed her permission to date me. That was the last straw. I confronted her, telling her she had crossed too many boundaries. She cried, apologized, then immediately turned it around on me, saying I had talked about her behind her back and ruined her life. I blocked her. For months, I was free. But when she came home for Christmas, it started all over again. When I ignored her messages for 3 days, she lost it, spammed me on every platform, threatened to show up at my house, and told me she would find out where I had moved if I didn't tell her. I finally snapped. I told her she was scaring me, that she had no respect for boundaries, and that I never wanted to see her again. She sent one final message. I love you. You'll regret this. That was the last time I heard from her. I don't know what she's doing now, and I don't want to find out. I met Ben in November of 2024. He wasn't someone I would have naturally gravitated toward, but we ended up in the same friend group through a mutual friend, Tom. I had always found Ben a little off. Something about him made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I wasn't the only one. Most of the school seemed to share the same feeling, treating him with quiet avoidance rather than open hostility. At first, I felt bad for him. I knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. So when we started hanging out in a larger group, I tried to be polite, to give him a fair chance. Maybe he was just misunderstood. That was my first mistake. Our group eventually formed a WhatsApp chat to keep in touch, and that's when the real Ben started to show himself. It started small, offbeat, weird jokes, strange comments that didn't quite fit the conversation. Then, the images began. At first, they were just creepy, dark humor memes, unsettling artwork. But they quickly escalated into something far worse. Photos of gore, bloody bodies, mutilated animals, close-ups of wounds, some so detailed that I wondered if they were real. I told him to stop, said it made me uncomfortable. He responded with a single sentence. Take a joke, stop being a puss. After that, he started messaging me directly. Stories about how he had hurt animals before, small things, stray cats, birds. At first, I thought he was lying, trying to get a reaction out of me. But the more he talked, the more I realized he wasn't joking. There was a level of detail in his descriptions that no one could fabricate. I stopped replying after that, but he didn't stop watching me. One Saturday, I went Christmas shopping alone in town. It was busy, packed with people moving between stores, lights twinkling from the street lamps as music played faintly from shop speakers. A normal, bustling holiday atmosphere. And then I saw him. Ben was standing at the far end of the street, just staring. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just out shopping too. But something about the way he was looking at me, completely still, unblinking, sent a chill through me. I gave him a small, awkward wave. He didn't wave back. Instead, he turned and walked down a side street. I felt a prickle of unease, but shook it off. Just Ben being weird, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. Until it happened again. Everywhere I went that evening, I would turn a corner, glance through a window, and there he was. Always at a distance. Always staring. Never approaching. By the time I gave up on shopping and headed home, my skin was crawling. I texted him, partly out of anger, partly out of fear. Were you following me? The reply came almost instantly. Don't know what you're talking about. I didn't believe him, but I let it go. I avoided him after that. I stopped talking in the group chat, stopped acknowledging him at school. But Ben had a way of inserting himself into situations, always finding a way to be there. Then one day, he and another friend, Jack, convinced me to come into the forest behind the school with them and another classmate, Zach. I don't know why I agreed. Maybe because Zach was coming too. Maybe because I thought if it was a group thing, it would be safe. It wasn't. We walked deeper into the woods, the trees swallowing the daylight, the air growing colder. Ben was acting strange, giddy, almost. His laugh was too loud, his movements too excited. Closer, he kept saying. Let's go closer. Closer to what? Something in his tone unsettled me. A sick kind of excitement, like he was leading us to some grand surprise he couldn't wait to unveil. Zach and I exchanged glances. We didn't like this. Let's head back, Zach said. Ben stopped walking. His expression shifted instantly, from excitement to something else. Something dark. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop us. He just watched as we turned around and made our way back. When Ben and Jack finally returned, they looked disappointed, as if we had ruined some plan they had carefully set in motion. It wasn't until later that I found out what that plan was. A few weeks after that incident, I removed myself from the group chat, hoping that if I distanced myself, Ben would lose interest. Then I heard what happened to Tom. Ben had attacked him with a homemade blade. It happened at school, right in the middle of the day. The wound wasn't fatal, just a deep gash near Tom's wrist, but it was enough to get Ben expelled. What scared me the most was that it hadn't come out of nowhere. He had talked about things like this before. He had fantasized about hurting people, about seeing their fear, about what it would feel like to have power over someone's life. And now he had actually done it. I should have felt relieved when he was expelled. Should have felt safe. But then I was added back into the group chat. And Ben was still there. He had been sending messages. Graphic self-harm photos. Long, rambling texts about how much he hated his family, how he blamed them for everything. And then, the last message he ever sent. "You're lucky." I didn't respond. None of us did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't talking to just anyone. He was talking to me. I don't know where Ben is now. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when I'm walking home late at night, when the streets are empty and the wind whispers through the trees, I get the strangest feeling. Like someone is watching. Like someone is waiting. And when I turn to check, just for a second, I swear I see a figure at the far end of the street. Standing still, unblinking, waiting. When I was 9, Sarah was my best friend. We were inseparable. If you saw me, you saw her. We walked to school together, played together, shared secrets. Everything a childhood friendship should be. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was. I ignored so many signs. Sarah lived one street over from me, which made it easy for me to stay over at her house every weekend. I never invited her to mine. My family was poor, and I was embarrassed about our tiny, cluttered house. Sarah never pushed the issue, and I was grateful for that. Her home was quiet, almost too quiet. Her mother worked late shifts, so we were often left alone. At first, it felt like freedom, no rules, no interruptions. But then Sarah started showing me things. She had a collection of her mom's old vampire movies, and every time we had a sleepover, she would put one on. These weren't the kind of movies kids our age should have been watching. I was too young to fully understand what I was seeing, but Sarah would lean in close and whisper, "Doesn't this make you want to do something weird?" I would laugh nervously, pretending I got the joke. She would press further. "Don't you ever think about things? About trying stuff?" I didn't know what she meant, but I knew it made me uncomfortable. She would go through her mother's drawers, pulling out things I didn't understand, placing them in my hands, and watching my reaction. When I would recoil, she would laugh, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't amusement. It was testing. I was a quiet, nervous child. I never stood up for myself. I think she knew that. At night, she would sing softly, patty cake," in a babyish voice right next to my ear while I was trying to sleep. Sometimes, she would sit on the floor in the dark, cradling her dolls, whispering to them. "They don't like you," she would say. "They think you're trying to steal me away." I should have told my mom. I should have stopped going over there. But I didn't. And then, when I was 10, I was attacked by a dog. A massive Akita. It ripped into my face, and I had to undergo reconstructive surgery. My face would never look the same again, and I had to take medication regularly. Every day, I had to leave class to go to the office for my treatment, and my friend Lauren would walk with me. This is when Sarah changed. She didn't like that Lauren was walking me to the office. She didn't like that people were paying attention to me, asking about my scars, checking in on me. She wanted things to go back to how they were when I followed her. So she lied. She told everyone she was pregnant. At 10 years old, she would cry, say she had to make plans, whisper to people about options. She got my other friend, Ellen, to tell her mom about it, hoping that would make it real. It worked for months. But then people started asking questions. And just like that, she dropped the pregnancy story. The next week, she had cancer. She was dying, she said. She would cry when no one else was looking, then turn and smirk at me. I knew she was lying. My aunt had cancer. I knew what it looked like. So I called her out. She hated that. From that moment on, she became cruel. She stole from me. My things would go missing, only to be found later, broken beyond repair. My first phone, a pink flip phone, vanished after a sleepover at Lawrence. My DS Lite, my prized possession, was gone. When my mom demanded answers, Lauren mysteriously found them weeks later, both smashed to pieces. I had my suspicions. Then, for Lauren's birthday, we all went swimming. I had never learned to swim. I was too scared of water, too afraid of sinking. Sarah noticed. "I'll carry you," she said, smiling. "Come on, I'll take you to the deep end so you can play with everyone else." I wanted to be included. I wanted to believe she had forgiven me for calling her out. So I agreed. She carried me halfway across the pool, then started dipping side to side, making me squeal. "Don't," I begged. "Please don't drop me." She laughed, and then she did. I sank instantly. I was flailing, trying to reach for anything, but she was holding me down. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. Then suddenly, hands grabbed me. A lifeguard pulled me out, coughing, choking on chlorine. "Sarah?" Sarah was laughing. "It was a joke," she said. "You need to stop being such a baby and learn to swim." That was the last time I ever wanted to be near her. Primary school ended, and we all went to secondary school together. But my new class schedule kept me away from Sarah. For the first time, I felt free. Then, one afternoon, I was walking home from school, and she was there, standing in front of the corner shop, waiting. Her school tie was tied around her head like a headband, her eyes red and puffy. I tried to walk past. She lunged. I barely had time to react before she was on me, clawing at my face, grabbing at my hair, her knees slamming into my ribs. I panicked. I had never been in a fight before. I didn't know what to do. So I grabbed her tie and pulled. She choked, stumbled, and fell to the ground. She burst into tears and ran away. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. But the day after my 12th birthday, my friend Ellen ran up to me in a panic. "Sarah brought a knife to school," she whispered. "She told me it was for you." I laughed. It was so ridiculous, it had to be a joke. But then the police arrived. Sarah was expelled. I never saw the knife, but I didn't need to. She had told multiple people her plan. She wanted me to know. I never saw her again, until I turned 18. She found me on Facebook, tagged me in an old class photo. Only me. I ignored it. A few months later, she messaged me, inviting me to her birthday party. I blocked her. Then I saw that she had reconnected with Lauren. That didn't surprise me. Maybe they had always been working together. Maybe Lauren was the one who had stolen and smashed my things all those years ago. I didn't care anymore. I was finally free of Sarah. Then, when I was 19, I was walking down the street with my boyfriend. And she was there, standing at the bus stop. She locked eyes with me and grinned. Then she pulled out her phone and started filming me. I don't know why. I don't want to know. But I do know this. If I ever see her again, I won't pretend that she's harmless. I won't wait to see what she does next. Sarah isn't just crazy. She's dangerous. When I was 7 years old, my life changed in a way I could never have expected. My parents got divorced. My mom, now a single parent, had to find a better paying job to support us, which meant moving to a different town. I didn't fully understand what was happening at the time, just that my dad wasn't coming with us, and that we were leaving behind everything familiar. The drive to our new home was long, nearly 12 hours, and we stopped midway in a small town filled with colorful murals and little artisan shops. It had an artsy, hippie vibe, the kind of place where people sold handmade jewelry on the sidewalks and played acoustic guitar outside coffee shops. My mom told me we were here to meet an old friend of hers, a woman named Paulette. "She's going to be staying with us for a while," my mom said as we pulled into a small East Indian restaurant. "She's between places right now, and I figured it would be nice to help her out." I didn't think much of it. Adults made weird decisions all the time. I just nodded as we walked inside, expecting to meet some normal, average woman. Paulette was not normal. She was tall. Too tall, at least a full head taller than my mom. Her frame was thin and bony, and she carried herself in a way that made her seem even longer, like a shadow stretched out by the setting sun. Her wild, frizzy hair had blonde streaks tangled into the deep brown curls, and her pale blue eyes were so light They almost looked white in the dim restaurant lighting. When she walked up to our table, she hugged my mom first. Then she turned to my older brother, shaking his hand with an overly long grip. But when she got to me, she just stood there. Her mouth was slightly open. She wasn't blinking, just staring. I swallowed nervously and held out my hand. She didn't take it. Then, suddenly, her face changed. Her mouth stretched into an enormous, unnatural grin, her teeth too large and too white. She leaned down, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that was too tight, pressing me against her chest like she was trying to absorb me. I didn't like it. During dinner, my mom and Paulette caught up, talking about their college days and everything that had happened since. I tuned most of it out, focusing on my food, but every now and then, I would look up and catch Paulette watching me. Not just glancing, not casual interest. Watching. That night, we arrived at our new house. It was mostly empty except for a few essential pieces of furniture. Our moving truck would arrive the next morning. There was already a bunk bed in one of the rooms, which my brother and I claimed immediately, me taking the top, him the bottom. I was exhausted from the long drive and fell asleep quickly. I woke up at 1:30 a.m. The patio light was on, casting a yellowish glow through the blinds. I turned over and looked through the small gaps in the window slats. Paulette was sitting on the deck, cross-legged, smoking a cigarette. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then, she moved. She stood up, slowly, and turned to face my window. My breath caught in my throat. I stayed as still as possible, not wanting to draw attention to myself. She just stood there. For at least 5 minutes, she didn't move, didn't shift, didn't smoke her cigarette, just faced my window, her head slightly tilted. I forced myself to roll over, to face the wall, squeezing my eyes shut. I listened, heart pounding, as I heard the patio door creak open. The front door closed. The patio light clicked off. I let out a slow breath, willing myself to sleep. But then, my bedroom door creaked open. I froze. Footsteps. Soft, careful steps moving across the room, coming closer and closer to the bunk bed. I kept my eyes shut, my face buried against the pillow, forcing myself to breathe evenly. If I pretended to be asleep, maybe she would leave me alone. Then I felt it. Fingertips. Cold, slender fingers running through my hair, combing it back gently. Nails scratching lightly against my scalp. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I didn't move. Then, something cool and oily pressed against the back of my neck. She was massaging me. My skin crawled as her hands kneaded the muscles of my neck, pressing firmly, her breath just barely audible behind me. "I gave you a neck massage so you wouldn't pee the bed," she whispered. I nearly stopped breathing. What? What did that even mean? Her fingers pressed into my skin, slow and deliberate. I didn't dare move. Eventually, I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion or terror because the next thing I knew, it was morning. At breakfast, she acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. She had made cereal for my brother and me, but my bowl had little chocolate chips sprinkled on top. His didn't. She just smiled at me. It happened again the next night. And the next. Each time, I stayed perfectly still. I didn't want her to know I was awake. I wanted to tell my mom, but I was scared. Scared that Paulette would hear me. Scared that my mom would dismiss it. Scared that somehow telling would make it worse. Instead, I started waiting until she went to bed before sneaking to the bathroom. But she knew. Every time I got up to pee, she would somehow be there too. The moment I opened my door, hers would slam open, and she would rush down the hallway, straight to the bathroom, cutting me off. Every single time. Eventually, I got so sick of it that I started peeing outside. Then came the worst night. I was extra careful, stepping as lightly as I could. It was nearly midnight. The house was silent. I crept toward the door. It flung open. Paulette burst out of her room, completely naked, sprinting down the hallway. I barely had time to react. I dropped to the floor, pressing myself into the shadows beside a plant, hiding. She stopped in the bathroom, didn't turn the light on, didn't close the door. She just stood there, silent, motionless. Then she started pacing the hallway. I held my breath, heart hammering, praying she wouldn't see me. After what felt like an eternity, she returned to her room. The next day, my brother and I were playing outside. He accidentally hit me in the head with a branch, leaving a small cut. Paulette saw it happen. She walked up to my brother and kicked him in the head, hard. He hit the ground crying. My mom lost it. She threw Paulette out that night. But before she left, she knelt in front of me, clutching my hands. "I hope I see you in another life," she said, eyes brimming with tears. "You remind me so much of my husband." I asked my mom about it later. Paulette's husband had died in Afghanistan. I never told my mom about the massages, or the way she watched me sleep, or the way, sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still feel those cold fingers on the back of my neck. There were 5 of us, 5 neighborhood kids who spent every afternoon together, running through the cul-de-sac, building forts in the woods, racing our bikes down the street until the sun dipped below the rooftops. We weren't just friends, we were a group, a little unbreakable unit, bound by childhood loyalty. And then Gabe moved in. At first, we were excited. A new kid meant new energy, new games, new stories. He was a little scrawny, with messy brown hair and a quiet way of watching people. His family had taken the house at the far end of the street, the one with the overgrown yard and the porch that sagged in the middle. We met him on the school bus. "You guys live on Ashwood, right?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from me and my cousin Drew. We nodded. "I used to live here a few years ago," he said, "before we moved away. But now we're back." It wasn't unusual. Families came and went all the time. But there was something odd about the way he said it, like the return wasn't entirely his choice. That first day, he seemed normal enough. A little quiet, maybe, but he laughed when we joked, nodded along when we talked about the forts we had built in the vine, our secret hideout deep in the woods behind the neighborhood. It took us a few days to learn the truth about him. Gabe had been expelled from our school before. He told us himself, almost like a badge of honor. "Yeah," he said casually, "I threw a desk at my teacher." We laughed at first, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. "I just got mad," he shrugged. "She kept pissing me off. So I threw the desk." It was the first crack in the illusion of normalcy. But we were kids, and kids forgive strange things easily. For a while, Gabe was just another member of the group. He came to the vine with us, helped us stack branches for a new fort, even played manhunt in the streets after dark. But then things got weird. It started with the way he talked. One day, we were hanging out in his backyard when he suddenly turned to us and said, "You ever think about how easy it is to kill something?" I stared at him. "What?" He picked up a stick and twirled it between his fingers. "Like, if you wanted to, you could just step on a frog, you know? Snap. Gone. Or, like, hold a bird under the water. Just to see what happens." No one responded. Drew kicked at the dirt, trying to change the subject, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Gabe wasn't saying it for shock value. He was thinking about it. And then came the night he chased Josh with a machete. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it the next day. Josh showed up at the bus stop looking pale and shaken, his hands stuffed deep in his hoodie pockets. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated, glancing down the street as if expecting Gabe to appear. "I was at his house last night," he said finally. "We were just hanging out in his backyard, and out of nowhere, he pulls out this fucking machete and starts swinging it around." I stared. "What?" Josh swallowed hard. At first, I thought he was just messing around. But then he fucking chased me with it. Like, actually ran after me. I had to book it home. My mom came outside when she heard me yelling, and he just stood there at the end of the driveway, grinning at us. "Did you tell anyone?" He shook his head. "What am I supposed to say? Hey, this kid I barely know tried to kill me last night." He scoffed. "The cops won't do shit until someone actually gets hurt." I didn't know what to say to that. That afternoon, when Gabe got on the bus, he acted like nothing had happened. He sat next to me, completely normal, chatting about a video game he had been playing. Josh didn't say a word to him. None of us did. For the first time, our friend group felt fractured, like we were all quietly trying to figure out how to handle this new, unpredictable force among us. Then, a week later, Gabe stabbed me in the neck with a pencil. It happened on the bus ride home. 1 second, we were talking. The next, I felt a sharp stab just below my jaw. I yelped, jerking away, reaching up to feel the wound. My fingers came away with a thin smear of blood. Gabe grinned. "Relax," he said. "It was just a joke." I switched seats. That was the last time I willingly sat next to Gabe. But the worst part, the part that still makes my skin crawl, was the way he reacted when he got kicked off the bus for it. For 2 days, he wasn't allowed to ride. And when he came back, the look he gave me was pure hatred. He sat at the front, but every time I walked past him, he would glare at me, muttering under his breath. Snitch. The final straw came a few days later. He texted me and Drew, asking if we wanted to hang out at the Vine. I should have said no. I almost did. But then he said, Josh is coming too. And I thought, okay. It's safe if there are more of us. We walked to his house, knocking on the door. When he answered, he was holding a kitchen knife. Not in a threatening way, just casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He smiled. Ready to go? Something was wrong. Where's Josh? I asked. Oh, he bailed, Gabe said easily. But whatever. We don't need him. I should have left right then and there. But I didn't. We followed him to the Vine, stepping through the narrow gap in the trees, moving down the slope toward the pond. Go find some sticks, he told me. I hesitated. Then I saw his hand inching towards something in his backpack. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned to Drew. Hey, we gotta go, I said quickly. Drew frowned. What? Why? Just now. I grabbed his arm, and we started walking away. Then we heard it. The sound of Gabe running after us. We bolted, crashing through the underbrush, racing up the hill, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't dare look back. When we finally reached the street, we stopped, panting, our hands on our knees. Gabe was gone. We never saw him again. The next day, his family moved out. No warning. No goodbyes. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I tried looking him up years later. No Facebook. No Instagram. No records. It was like he never existed. But sometimes, when I walk home late at night, I get this feeling. Like someone is watching me. And when I turn around, the street is empty.